And we're now recording. So we are ready to begin case study 3. All right. So this is the case study of the, be sure you've read chapter 5, Students' Rights and Principles, Quick Reference Guide to School Law, cite how you address and penalize bullying or cyberbullying. And you know what to do from there. You have a presentation and you'll do your reflection. So we've got Jimmy and Willie, and we'll go from there. All right. So who's going to do the first presentation?
I can do it.
Who's I? I'm
Trisha.
sorry. Trisha. All right. I'm sorry. There you are. I'm making you the host.
Okay.
I'm making Trisha the host. I am going to stop my share. Close that. I will stop my video. So you should now be able, it'll ask you to be the host.
Be the host. Where do you see that at?
Okay. You are now the host.
Okay. What should can you walk me through
Share
this?
screen. Just hit share.
Okay, just hit share. Okay.
Just hit share. I'm sorry. Normally it gives you a little thing goes across your screen that says you're the host. You have to wait on that before you can share, but it just told me that you were the host.
Okay.
So when you hit share,
okay.
and then if it gives you choices, the upper left choice, screen or desktop, share your screen or whichever one, different terminology according to what kind of computer you're using. So when you go to share, and then share screen or share desktop, it's the top left choice when it gives you a series of choices.
Yep. I'm clicking on the one that says screen.
Okay, there you go.
And it says screen sharing has failed to start. Please try again later.
Okay.
Okay.
What kind of computer are you using?
A Dell.
Okay.
Laptop.
Okay, I'm going to reclaim the host. I am going to make you the host again. Yes, you are now the host.
Okay.
So you will try again. Share and then screen.
Share. Screen. Let's see. Share. Screen. It will not let me do it. Keep saying there's an error.
Is there somebody else in your group that we can see if it's a Trisha problem or a Zoom problem? Is there somebody else who could be the host?
One of the other ladies. Do you have people pull it up?
Who?
Good.
Shannon. Okay, Shannon. All right, I'm gonna make you the host. Yes. You are now the host. Share and then screen. There it goes.
Okay.
There we go. All right. We are normal.
Okay. So with the case, it says we are normal too. And go ahead to the summary. So the background of the case deals with 2 guys, Willie and Jimmy, who were students at this high school. And initially their relationship was one that most people viewed as just being a friendship. And what ends up happening is that their relationship went from just being a friendship to being a romantic relationship. And it took the staff and the students by surprise when they saw them kissing and holding hands at school. And when this happened, the principal started to get phone calls and concerns from parents and then some concerns from students. And so the principal, she held a meeting with the students to discuss, what was taking place. And the students told them that their relationship was a romantic one and that they were planning on going to prom together. And so the principal was not too happy about this, and she received calls from one set of parents, the Hudsons, who were discussing about planning a parent boycott unless the principal did something about the students. They viewed the students' romantic relationship that was something that shouldn't be taking place because of the religious views of them and of the community. So the parents, the principal met then with those two students, Willie and Jimmy, and she also met with the parents to see if possibly they could change their mind on this situation and, kind of talk them out of it. She didn't want them really going to prom because she was afraid of their safety, but she was also looking at the negative publicity that the school could be getting in the process. And what ends up happening is after the meeting, the parents kind of viewed that the conversation was a veiled threat to their First Amendment right. And so the students spoke to the principal then the following day and said, besides attending prom, they also wanted to have in place a day of diversity, a day of silence, and also form a gay-straight alliance. Okay? And they were hoping to get this all done before the end of the year because both of the students are graduating from high school. Okay? So the court case in particular that comes into play with this is the Tinker versus Des Moines court case. Court case took place in 1969, and it was dealing with students who were protesting the Vietnam War by wearing armbands to school. And they wore the armbands to school, and the principal suspended them, and eventually the court case goes to Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says that the students have the right to do this as part of their First Amendment. And just because they're students, it doesn't mean that they lose their rights once they enter the schoolhouse. So going on from this court case, we were looking at the laws in particular that support students and how it applies to the situation with Willie and Jimmy. And we looked at the First Amendment, definitely applies to them. This is one of these rights that the students have, freedom of speech. Students also have the right to the 14th Amendment with due process and equal protection rights, guaranteeing fairness to all. The Equal Access Act of '84 comes into play here because it gives Jimmy and Willie the right to form their club, and if they were not given that right, it could deny the school access to federal funding. And then Title IX comes into play here too because it protects students from any type of sex discrimination. So when we were looking at the questions, the 4 questions that were in that chapter, it said, would you consider Mary Lou's comments a veiled threat? Initially, we did not consider her comments to be a veiled threat. She should have addressed it, the public display of affection initially, just because that's a school policy within all schools. You're not supposed to be kissing and making out and hugging in the hallways.
Mm-hmm.
And we thought maybe she may have been a little insensitive just because this seemed like it was the first time she was dealing with a homosexual couple, and she probably just was thrown for a loop. But the problem was she was ignoring the school policies and she was ignoring the school laws. And those were things that she should have considered first, and she should have enforced them regardless of what her opinion of the situation was. And the fact that she was obviously first couple she's had to deal with that's a same-sex couple, and she just didn't, she went with her thoughts and her feelings, and she needed to follow rules and procedures. Second question, so what are Mary Lou's responsibilities under the law? She has to allow them to form that gay-straight alliance because of the Equal Access Act. And the students have the right to express themselves because of that First Amendment. Okay. For question number 3, how should Mary Lou respond to the concerns of the Hudsons? At this point, she needs to seek counsel from the superintendent and the school board attorney just because it's a new situation for her. And it seems to be a whole new situation for the community. And if she's getting phone calls from the Hudson, she's going to be getting phone calls from other parents, so she needs to seek those above her at the Board of Education. The second point was that she has to understand she's going to get a lot of phone calls from parents who are concerned about the situation, but regardless of that, when she's talking to the parents, she has to go by the laws and the school policies that are in place, regardless of what those parents' opinions are, and she has to make them known about it. And then the other thought we came up with was the constitutional rights to privacy. Willie and Jimmy are not the Hudson's children, so she won't be discussing what's taken place with them with the Hudsons. That's none of their business. The fourth question, should Mary Lou allow Jimmy and Willie to attend the prom as a couple? Yes. Once again, First Amendment follows through here. The 14th Amendment, equal protection under the law, guarantees their rights to attend the prom together as a couple. Title IX comes into play here, and once again, Tinker versus Des Moines supports their rights to do this. Okay. So going on with that, we looked at some of the ethical paradigms and how to address this bullying. And we looked at all 4 areas. When it came to justice, she needs to follow the district's bullying policy. First Amendment, 14th Amendment, they have to be upheld, as well as the Equal Access Act. Public schools, they cannot ignore harassment of gender under Title IX. And then the other court case that follows through with this is the Boyd County High School Gay Straight Alliance versus Board of Education. This deals with bringing in anti-harassment training for students and staff. And I believe most school districts at this point in North Carolina have some type of harassment training for staff. I don't know how far they go with students, even though it's noted in the student handbook. Some schools may talk more about it. I know the school that I'm at, they don't really address it with the students. They address it with staff, but not with students. As for the care part of the ethical paradigms, she shows a concern for the students because of their safety, but she seems to be more concerned about the publicity that's going to come out of this. Her job is to provide a safe and orderly school environment for all students, but she's also not supposed to be ignoring the laws in the process. And she's kind of just hoping that this situation will go away because the 2 boys are going to graduate, but they're not going to go away. She needs to address them by the laws, and it's going to continue. Other students eventually will come forward with her on this too. As for the critique, the principal needs to create a supportive school environment and climate for all of her students. And she also has to make sure that all other students are aware of the consequences of bullying Willie and Jimmy and any other students that are in similar situations to these 2 guys. And then lastly, with the profession, she didn't uphold the laws to protect her students and allow equal opportunity for all students. And with this, due process is necessary when it comes to bullying and any type of disciplinary action that needs to be taken place. Okay, so what did I miss?
Not a thing. Great job. Excellent. Let's run through it right quick. You hit all the points you were supposed to hit. Tinker versus Des Moines, due process, Title IX, equal access, First and 14th Amendments. You hit the ethical paradigm. So let's look at the questions. Did you consider what the principal said? A veiled threat.
When I went back and read it again, when I looked at it, it was like she was thrown for a loop and she didn't know what to say. I don't think she was meaning it for it to be a threat just because this was something that was new to her. I think she was trying to get rid of the situation without trying to hurt anyone's feelings. But once again, she wasn't looking at the policies of the school and the rules that were in place that were meant to protect these students. And it's all because it seems like it was a new situation for her.
Mm-hmm. Well, you made a great point about antecedent behaviors. They were allowed to break the school rules in terms of public displays of affection, those kinds of things that you should address early on. I've told you the story. I had a student back in the 90s, a male student who wore a dress. I sent him home because his dress was too short, not because he was wearing a dress. He had to wear it by the same standards as everybody else. And for whatever reason, once everybody stood that he didn't get a special pass or whatever, and that he couldn't be over the top and overboard, that it didn't go away, but it kind of got things back in perspective. You made a great point about purpose says you can't discuss other people's children with parents. I mean, I don't know why she's entertaining all these conversations with parents to begin with. This is somebody else's child.
And I was going to ask about that too. How would you have changed the rhetoric of the parents?
Oh, you're not going to change their rhetoric.
Take your kid to private school if you have that much of an issue.
I mean, you know, again, public schools is an egalitarian business. If you can afford, if you want to go to private school, please go. But we can't talk about other people's children, their punishment, what we've done, what we've not done. The first mistake the principal made was not addressing their behavior, and that's what kind of got this thing out of control, got it sideways, is everybody saw their behavior in school, and just like rubbing everybody's nose in it. That's what got the community riled up. If she had de-escalated that to begin with, it would probably been manageable. But because she ignored the little things, they became the big thing.
Right. And with public display of affection, a lot of times what ends up happening is that it's just not enforced very well. And, you know, even where I'm at, some administrators say something to students, and then I've got other administrators who don't say anything when they see students kiss.
Well, one of the things is a truism in our business, and we really work on this, and when we're in our preparation, especially in the clinical part, you'll hear, you know, sometimes you'll hear experienced administrators, but usually they're, you know, the experienced administrators get a little smarter as they go. But you'll hear emerging or fairly neophyte or new administrators say, you know, boy, it'd be a whole lot, you know, we'd have it made if it wasn't for, you know, Tom and Jerry. Those two just destroy our school. What they don't understand is that if Tom and Jerry was gone, there'd be a new Tom and Jerry. The problem is not Tom and Jerry, it's that you don't have a system or a process in place to deal with Tom and Jerry. And you don't get lucky enough that you don't, Tom and Jerry, as soon as they're gone, like on this one, Jimmy and Willie, as soon as they're gone, this problem will be gone. No, it won't be gone. There'll be 2 more next year or 4 more. What's important to learn here is process. 603, MELS 603 is law and finance, but in organizational management, the OMA, this is about designing systems and processes in place to handle things that are going to come up in the school business. You're not going to get lucky all the time. That you know, you're going to have things come up. You need to have processes in place to handle them. You need to deal with antecedent behaviors before they get big. Because we're going to talk about antecedent behaviors when we're together face to face that become violent offenses when they're ignored. And that's going to cost you your job as an administrator if you have too many of those violent offenses. See, they're not random. People think violent offenses are random. They're not random. We can predict them. We know what the antecedents are. This one was easy to see what was going to happen with this case. You allowed them to sit around in public and kiss and hold hands and do those kinds of things. It was easy to see where this one was going to go. So the administrator made about every mistake or error that you could make. Now, the reason I asked the question, and even the author says in the book, and if you read the book on this one, that they don't consider what the principal said a veiled threat, I absolutely do. I would not want to have to go to court and defend why I said that. And the reason I say I absolutely do is it's not what you learn when you go to court. It's not what you intended. It's what they implied, what they inferred from what you said. And that's where you get, that's the problem that you get into. She could have had the best intentions. but that's not how it was received. Because these people were already getting bullied and threatened and cyberbullied. This was, if absent that, it might have just been good advice. But considering what they were already going through, I would hate to have to go to court in this case and defend what I said if I said this to these kids. That would not go well, I'm afraid for you. So the reason I asked it is context. Court cases a lot of times are about context. And these school law cases are a lot of times about context. Absent, if this was just, two kids and you called them in for some, it wasn't a big deal and nothing had been made of it, there wasn't any bullying or cyberbullying, those might, it might have sounded like she cared for them. But in the context that they were already in, which was an imbroglio in the community, that was absolutely, the administrator shouldn't have said anything in that vein. Absolutely not. So this is a roadmap. This is a cautionary tale for all the dumb things that you can do, and even for the right reasons. I mean, I can't know what was in this lady's heart, but for all the, she could have had the best intentions in the world at heart here, but she made pretty much every mistake that you could make. She did not follow the law. She did not start with antecedent behaviors. She didn't enforce the code of conduct. She did not afford these young men due process. She failed on all the paradigms of ethics. She discussed other people's children with parents, which is a violation of federal law. I mean, short of burning the building down, there's not a lot more she could have done wrong.
Can I ask a question? Did she meet whole group with both boys and both sets of parents? And if so, is that an issue as well?
Yes.
That should have been individual.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. That's a FERPA violation, by the way. That's why I said, only thing she could have done worse was set the building on fire. Pretty much. That's about it. This is one of those, I love this case. I wanted you to see this one. This is when it just goes from bad to worse. You get started off, you don't know what to do. You're in action. You got two boys hugging and kissing and no telling what else in your building. You don't know what to do, so you don't do anything. Think if I ignore it, it'll go away. They're going to graduate this spring anyway. Not understanding you've got a process in place and you got to work it. Because there'll be a new Jimmy and Willie next year or next month. Jimmy and Willie, because they've been allowed to do this, there's probably more Jimmys and Willies in your building if you're a high school of any size, just by the law of large numbers, just random. There's going to be more gay couples there, boys and girls.
Mm-hmm.
So this notion, boy, if we can just get to the end here, these two will be gone, and that'll be no. There's always 2 or 4 or 6 more that step up. That's why I said early on in your career as administrator, you think, man, if we just get rid of that kid or those 2 or 3 kids, how much better our day. There'll always be more that step up and take their place if those were gone.
Mm-hmm. There's one of the schools that's in my county. They had a student maybe about 2 months ago who came forward and said that she now identifies as a mermaid.
Mm-hmm.
And the county doesn't know what to do with it. So
just keep the fishermen away, I guess. I don't know.
So
the story of mermaids and fishermen, so just keep the fishermen away and you'll be fine. So I mean, quite seriously, if you've got policies in place that protect all children, then it shouldn't be a problem for you.
all right.
Now, I don't think any court in the land would make you build a swimming pool so she could swim every day or anything like that. I don't know that there would be any extraordinary measures you would have to take for her. But that'd be one of those. But as long as you're offering equal protection under the law for all students, you should be fine.
Mm-hmm.
no matter what they identify as. The problem comes in when they identify as something that naturally breaks the laws of the building. You know, she identifies as a mermaid. Well, I can't go to class. I just need to hang out at the pool all day. Well, we can't do that.
Mhm.
That wouldn't be appropriate. But if you've got equal protections, but yes, you've hit all the things that need to be hit in this one. It started out with inactivity, without having a policy in place and not following it, and then it just got worse. It just got worse, and it usually does. And then you can't get in front of it, and it runs over you. All right, let's think a level higher. Somebody that's been in the position that I've been in, Dr. Laws has been in. If you were the superintendent, what would you do with this principal?
Well, in my county, they promote him and send him to central office.
Well, of course, I mean, I get that. We got a clipboard that needs an owner. Carry a clipboard around. Look busy. I get it. But if you were running an actual real school district where, where there was actually performance mattered, what would you do with this principal? What would you do with all your principals?
They all need to go through training on cyberbullying and bullying. Number one, they all need to put some type of plan in place where they're teaching this to their faculty and to their students.
Yeah.
I feel like they need a refresher on, the First Amendment and what it means. Like that when it was talking about the heckler's veto, you can't reward the bottle throwers.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're exactly right. You can't just the rule of the mob. You can't allow that to happen.
And probably some LGBTQ training too, just to get in front of that one, because some people might think it was discriminatory because they were a same-sex couple.
Yeah. But those are things that you would do for your district. Well, specifically, what would you do with this principal?
Have her sit in on those.
That'd be it.
I remember one time, well, the district's big thing was, is it going to hit the press? So if it hits the press, then we're going to do A, B, C, D, get in front of the press.
Yeah,
Right.
you're exactly right.
And if it doesn't hit the press, then we're going to go over here to plan B.
If it goes more than 3 news cycles, there's got to be blood. That was always the rule of thumb in the central office at Charlotte-Mecklenburg. If we close the evening with it at 11 o'clock news, we expect it'll be on the morning news because it's slow overnight, and we expect because of lunchtime news. But if it was on the evening news again, the 4th news cycle at 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock, then there's going to have to be blood to satisfy that crowd. And I can tell you, I'm not a good person. I can tell you right now that I'll sit and I would just be praying that there'd be a bad car wreck or a shooting on the west side so we could get off TV. So I wouldn't have to fire somebody. I'm serious. I can be. Oh, please let something go on, maybe a fire where nobody gets hurt. Something that that'll deflect the attention, because if we don't, I'm going to have to let somebody go.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that's going to satisfy the mob.
Right.
And it's only going to get worse. We need something. I mean.
And they'll use it against her because of all the rules and laws that she broke.
Yeah. Without Googling, anybody know who Gary Condit is? Without Googling now, he's the luckiest man alive. He was a congressman, and he was the prime suspect in the disappearance of the intern that he had been having an affair with in Washington. You can Google him now. Let me see. Let's Google him right quick. Let me go to Google. Google. Yes, I still want to go to Google, Bing. Let's see. Gary Condit. That's him. Political career. Chandra Levy. He was having an affair with a 23-year-old intern. He was 53.
Yeah, I remember
And
this.
then she disappeared.
Yeah.
And he was the prime suspect.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened? 9/11.
We never heard about her again.
That was the end of it.
Yep.
And he slinked out of Washington, you know, and more than likely, he was withholding important information. Public interest was high. He was a pro-family, dyed-in-the-wool Republican, and he was having an adulterous affair with a woman younger than his daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And he misled the police. And then he was throwing stuff away, and all these things were going on, and they were just about to charge him, and 9/11 happened.
Mm-hmm.
Knocked him off the news cycle. He slinked out of town.
Yeah. I remember she was a brunette. Did they ever find her body?
Yeah. Yeah, all the lawsuits, he tried to sue people. And then they found out that more than likely he had suborned her murder. But by the time that people got back around to it, it was like 3 years later.
Mm-hmm.
He got off the hook. And he tried to sue people, and he kept losing the case because there was enough evidence. But, I mean, you know, he's the luckiest man I ever saw in politics because of 9/11. And that's, but what's illustrative of that point, this is not just some arcane point here. When you've made some mistakes, and even if he didn't kill the girl, when you've made some mistakes and the press gets after you, there's not much way to get them off of you unless you get lucky enough for something else big to knock you off the news cycle. And most of us don't get that lucky. And the way you get out of the swamp is don't get in it to begin with. You can't depend on a 9/11. You can't depend on terrorists to fly airplanes into the building to save you, or there to be a weak shooting on the west side, or 11-car pileup on the Brookshire Freeway. You can't depend on that. What you better depend on is good administrative practice to bail you out. That way you don't need to be bailed out. When you get in a situation like her, there's no help for you. There's no hope for you. I can tell you right now, as her supervisor, she's got to go. We can't live with this. Not if we're in a multimedia town. Now, if we're in some place in rural western or eastern North Carolina where there's no news media on us all the time, and her granddaddy's on the school board or the county commissioners, we might be able to do something. We still probably have to move her to a different school or give her a clipboard at the central office, as Tricia said. We might have to do that. But if we're in a media market, Charlotte, Greensboro, Raleigh, Fayetteville, Wilmington, Asheville, she's got to go. I'm just telling you from somebody that had to do that. That this is a career ender. If you're somewhere where you can be seen, this is a career ender.
So I have a question about a situation kind of similar to this, the same kind of concept. I had a student, she graduated last year, so I guess it was her freshman year. And when she was in 8th grade, I say she very loosely because they go by they most of the time, but they wanted to be referred to as Oliver instead of the given birth name of Sarah, because they were transgender into a gentleman, though by the time they were juniors and seniors, they kind of were cisgender and didn't really go by any gender. But anyways, in 8th grade, asked the teacher to call them Oliver. Didn't really make a big deal about it being because they were transgender and wanted to be a boy, just that was the name they wanted to go by, because they felt most comfortable with it. And the teacher refused to call the student Oliver and said, that's not your name. I can't call you that name. And the student even took it as far, and this was a very, fiery student who would stand up for themselves, and went to the superintendent and said, hey, I want to be called by this name. Why doesn't this teacher call me this name? And the superintendent actually said, well, no, it's not your given name. They don't have to call you that. And to me, that upset me a little bit, because I don't know about y'all, but every time I call roll in my class on like the first week of school, I say, if there's another name you want me to call you by, just let me know so I can take note of it, right? Either the shortened version of your name, or half the kids go by their middle names, or some other random name that you just don't really even understand. I mean, as long as it's not like an offensive name, like I'm not going to call you some curse word or something, then it never really bothered me. And I just wanted to ask, like, was the superintendent wrong in that, or?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought. He's meh. So the funny thing is I think he works at Gardner Webb now.
Probably does.
If you know who I'm talking about.
That does not surprise me.
You guys happen to have an old Johnston County superintendent.
Yeah.
So he was in the wrong. Like, that teacher should have called the child Oliver.
Oliver, and went on about their business.
What?
Yeah, should have called the kid Oliver and went on about their business. I mean, how big a deal is that? How many times do we call kids by something other than their first name?
And that was my thing. Like,
we call kids by their middle name. Some kids say, well, my name is,
and
Wayne David. I want to go by David.
Who's to say what name is what gender? Like, we get kids all the time that are named Tyler. Tyler could be a girl name or a boy name. Oliver could really be a girl or a boy name. Generally it's boy, but we're not there to make that decision. And it really frustrated me.
Yeah, I'm not going to do like, it's not my job to do like trying to sex cats, lift her tail and look. I'm not doing that. I'm not interested in any of that. If you want to be called John or Sally or whatever, that's fine with me. Let's move on, because that's the law. That's the thing we have to remember. That's not just common sense and good practice. It's also the law.
Yeah. So,
why are you fighting? Why are you fighting a battle you can't win? Well, I saw he worked for me, and of course he was a nitwit, and I was too. But I had this fellow that worked for me, and I moved on from that district, and I'd gone to a couple more districts, but I think I might have even been retired and been with Gardner Webb. But anyway, he eventually made a principal in that little small district. And he sent kids home over their T-shirt.
Mm.
But there's no policy that allowed him to do that. And so he got in the paper and tried to, in the court of public opinion, win his case in the case of court of public opinion, calling on these dyed-in-the-wool conservative Christian community people about this and that and the other. And I was like, that won't help you when you go to court, nitwit. And it didn't. And he ended up having to retire a little bit early. But yeah, superintendent encouraged him to explore his options in retirement, and he had to be done. You can't. So you're a hero in your community, but that has no cachet, no credit when you go to court. All they want to know is that you follow and administer the law as you were charged to do. But he thought if he went to the newspaper and kind of riled up his community, the flag in one hand and the Bible in the other, that would absolve him for being an idiot, for breaking the law. It will not. Just a matter of course, it will not.
I'm curious, what was on the t-shirts?
You remember they were red, black, and green, and said, I think they said it's a black thing you wouldn't understand. You remember when those came out years ago? I'm trying to remember over what court case or what had happened in society that had caused that. And he had a couple of African American kids that wore those to school, and he sent them home. And he riled up the community, the God and flag, and all that was anti-American. It had a picture of Africa, it was his outline of Africa, black, white, and red, and they were being un-American according to him. He wasn't a racist or a bigot. Students were un-American. But they had the right to free speech. There was nothing on the shirt that was derogatory or profane or any of that. And so he sent them home. And then, when the parents objected and the ACLU got involved, he thought he could go to the local newspaper, which, it was so sorry my dog wouldn't even pee on it. That it was redundant. And so they went to the local little, newspaper they throw out in the yard free and thought he could, get enough moral support in the community. Well, that's all well and good, except when you go to court, that doesn't matter. He thought that could save him. The last refuge of a scoundrel, patriotism. They were disrespecting the flag by having the amount of the African continent on the shirt. So he pulled that in, just pulled it out of somewhere. We all know where he pulled it out of. But to try to save himself. But no, you overstepped your authority. You didn't follow the rules, and even in a district like that, they ended up having to settle the case, pay out of it, because the superintendent was smart enough to know that it was a loser when they went to court. But they had no chance of winning. The board attorney and all the legal experts told them, so what grounds are you going to win this on? I mean, this is a clear violation of these student civil rights. How you expect to win this? And when you do dumb things like this, we have to separate from you, even in small districts sometimes. Where you have popular support, we still have to separate from you. We just have to. We can't allow people who break the law to continue to work in our business. It erodes public confidence and trust in the lawful things that we have to do. We can't have people who just kind of make it up on their own and cowboy it. So, excellent job. I don't know. You'll have to tell me, are you learning, or is this one just easier than the others? Or have you figured out the process now?
No, we're learning.
You're just pulling my leg now.
No. After the last two are like, crap, we have to just look at law.
Yay! You finally, this one had a lot of bells and whistles that could have distracted you. I'm most impressed that you picked up on the inappropriate display of affection. Didn't matter, boy or girl, didn't matter. Or boy, girl, did not matter. Or they, didn't matter. You don't get distracted by that stuff. They didn't follow their own code of conduct.
Yeah.
And then it got sideways, and the parents and all that doesn't matter. That was all bells and whistles to distract you. We look first at the law, and then we look at the ethical paradigm of our profession. Those are the things that we have to judge ourselves on, our actions or inaction, based on those. Not what we feel in our heart or what we think or what's popular or any of those kinds of things. And so, excellent job on this one. But again, you're not, very few times will you get the Gary Condit relief, somebody flies a plane into the building. Most of the time, the news media stays on you until, we can't do anything for you administratively. All right, who's next? Give me a name.
We'll go.
Who?
Me, Tori. Hi.
Tori. Oh, there you are. I'm making Tori the host. All right, Tori, you are now the host. I'll stop my share. And I'll turn my video off. And it should allow you to share your screen. There we go.
Yay. All right. So we also talked about Tinker versus Des Moines and Get Low. Yeah. So courts have affirmed students' free speech rights are protected by the Constitution so long as they do not present a clear and present danger or threaten the material disruption of the education process. And also, in the event that students' activities threaten the effective operation of the school, principals are given clear authority to limit or ban students' activities. So we kind of tried to go with cut and dry and look at law, and so I was like, let's just jump in there and just cause effect kind of thing. So the students were talking about the Day of Diversity, organized class activities around issues such as race, class, gender identity, and sexual orientation. I guess that was what I was supposed to be.
Not secular.
Yeah, not secular. Not allowed, material disruption of the education process. So that affects the curriculum and what's happening in the school. So we kind of went at this from a different direction, I guess. Really looking at some of the demands and how the principal should respond. So the day of silence, students remain silent for an entire day to raise awareness. Not allowed because it can threaten the effective operation of the school. Students form a gay straight alliance club. Allowed. It does not threaten the effective operation. Has to be formed. Cannot be arbitrary as far as who does and who doesn't have the clubs. Schools are well within the scope of their authority to adopt rules that restrict student gatherings to non-disruptive times, place, and behavior. So there could be parameters on when clubs meet, but they have to be allowed to meet. Would it have been a veiled threat? The comments of the parents and boys asking them to speak sense, wait till after graduation. Yeah, it could be a veiled threat. Let's see. Responsibilities under the law. Restrict activities that disrupt the education process or threaten the effective operation of the school. Allow activities that follow regulations set forth for all student groups. How should she have responded to the Hudsons? Legally, the school cannot restrict activities of a group as long as it does not disrupt the operation of the school. Regulations must be enforced consistently for all groups. Rules cannot be arbitrary even when there are opposing views. Cannot prohibit them from attending as a couple. Public displays of affection can be prohibited if regulations applied fairly and consistently for all students.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
And then into the paradigms here, cannot have different regulations for different subgroups. It can't be arbitrary. Care, loyalty, and trust. In her capacity as a leader, so building trust in students should be top priority. The two students should feel like the principal cares enough to ensure they are not discriminated against. The promise for all students. And sorry, my little Facebook thing there. Critique, let's see, corrupted, moral. There might be other things happening in the school that are morally wrong, but attention might not be given in those cases. So this one has the attention, but there might be other things going on that are not being addressed. They're equally as concerning for various reasons. Let's see, safeguard the values of democracy, equity, and diversity, promote social justice, consider the implication of legal consequences based on the decision that's made. And then as far as the bullying and cyberbullying, there's some court cases here and what these did was upheld the right of school administrators to discipline students for online speech that either caused school disruption or school officials to reasonably believe it would trigger a disruption in the environment. They should have a policy in place and shared with parents and students regarding social media and be consistent in investigations and discipline. Do not neglect reports and address cyberbullying as part of the anti-bullying curriculum.
Very good.
And that was it.
All right, go back to slide 1.
This one?
Okay. All right, in the event students' activities threaten the effective operation of schools, principals are given clear authority to limit or ban student activities. This also goes to things like student newspaper, student TV broadcast, closed circuit, those kinds of things. You do have the right to regulate those activities. Excellent point. Go to your next slide. All right. Day of diversity. Now, not allowed, material disruption. Now, the smart thing to do, though, your slide is absolutely correct. It worked. The smart thing to do, what should the school do? The school should organize the day of diversity.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and we did, I've seen that done also. When was it? You know, when the students were walking out because of the school violence? So what we did was sort of shape it into allow them to do that, but kind of still put some parameters around what was happening. So they were still in place, but you know.
Yeah. Why? I mean, get in front of it. Don't let students do it because there's no telling what you'll have. It may look like the drag race at Cosmos Cafe at midnight on Saturday. I mean, you don't want that, but you need to get in front of it yourself and have some organized activities around that. The schools that were smart on the walkout, they had some organized activities, didn't disrupt their school, and they went on about their business, and everybody was happy. It was the nitwits that, oh, we're not doing that. You know, that we're on the wrong side of history that ended up with such disruptions. Go to your next slide. Again, day of silence. Again, same thing. Don't give it to students to do because then it becomes it gets sideways on you. But you can do those things.
Mm-hmm. I've also seen that done, but it was in the parameter of, you know, when you're in instruction in your classroom, you're still expected to participate, but the rest of the day you could do that.
Well, does anybody old enough to know what a club day schedule is?
Yes, we had club day schedules when I was in high school, and I'm not that old. Thank you.
There you go. What could you do? You can run a club day schedule where you take 5 or 10 minutes off every class and have an extra period of 30 to 45 minutes where you could do these things. That way you have no material disruption of your day. We used to do that all the time.
We still have that in my high school. We have like a remediation period.
Yeah.
And if you're on,
we call them 0 periods now. I just wondered if there's anybody old enough to remember what they were called club day schedule. We call them 0 periods now. Will you create a 0 period from time
we
to
still
time?
call them club days.
There you go. There you go. See, you can shave 5 to 10 minutes off blocks of time, you know, off or a little here and a little there, and come up with an extra period, and you can handle some of these things on your own. It doesn't have to be a whole day, but you can have different activities scheduled, and then students that want to participate in the day of silence, or that want to do what was the previous slide. Go back to the previous slide, that wants to do a diversity day or activity, they can go to that, but other students that don't want to can go somewhere else. And just like club day used to be, you chose where you wanted to go on club day. That was up to you. You had options.
We do it where Mondays we have homeroom where students they get all their weekly stuff, and then they decide what they're going to do each Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And Tuesday is first block / first block clubs. Tuesday is second block clubs. third block clubs, fourth block, and fourth block clubs. And any teacher can hold a club during the time that they have planning. So say I teach blocks 1, 2, and 3, then on Fridays during fourth block clubs, and if I want to host a club, then I can host that club. And so students are allowed to pick up to one club, but the thing is that if they're missing work or they're failing, so they have below a 60, I think is what we do, then they have to stay in their class, because going to clubs is a privilege.
That's right.
So they have to have a club card, and the teacher they have to go in and check in with their teacher after announcements during this 45-minute block. Then they're allowed to go to their club. And so we have 45 minutes, really 40, because after announcements and the kids get there to meet with our clubs once a week. And it works out very nicely.
Yeah. Now, on a case like this, on the day of diversity or the day of silence, I wouldn't invoke the 60 rule on them. I would let them, I would make this where it was open to anybody that wanted to go.
Oh, yeah.
You wouldn't have to qualify for that. But yeah, you could work this easily into your schedule as an administrator. You can have you a standby. I had 4 or 5 standby schedules all the time as needed, that we could run a particular schedule, and had different ones that we could run. So that we could create a block of time, a small block of time, if we needed it for whatever reason. Again, this is the organization management of schools. If you're smart enough to do that, you can get in front of some of these things, and you can create a vehicle or a venue or a method to address these issues.
Well, one of the things that you said, Dr. Lamb, you kept asking, what would you do with the principal? As her supervisor, I would probably, implore on her to have something like a town hall meeting.
Yeah.
Kind of get the parents together, because, it's not, and then kind of just sensitize them in terms of, it's not all about religious heritage or what is morally correct.
That's correct.
It's basically protecting these kids. Constitutionally, you cannot do that to them.
Exactly right.
So I would probably, call up like a town hall and kind of talk to them. And we kept saying there are going to be other cases like these. So you're going to have Jim and probably Jack. You're probably going to have Eva and Jane. But you're going to also, later on, you might have a transgender kid. So, it's not going to, because of the way the world is now, these things will happen. So they need to be sensitized.
Oh, yeah. It's always been something. And it's not going to stop.
Yeah.
Now, I'm old enough that when I came along, it was interracial dating. That was the hot button issue of my era. It's now the gender. It was race then. So it's always going to be something, is what I'm telling you. You better plan for it. And you can organize, manage, get in front of it, follow the law, do the ethical thing, create alternative schedules, create some time to do these things and address these. But you need to make sure that you understand your job is there to protect the rights of students, and make sure that you do the legal things and the ethical things. And the parents that come and complain, we need to give them voice. Absolutely, we can do that.
Yeah, and she shouldn't coerce the boys not to go to the prom. She's subtly telling them not to come. And when we were discussing as a group, I said, the prom doesn't say invited guest only.
Right.
It's free to all students. And so she doesn't have the right to do that. And while I was reading, I also came across a case that's in court. I'm in New York right now, where the same thing's happening to 2 boys. And one of the things that they're doing, they're taking the names of the prom dates. And if it's 2 boys, then they're not permitting them to go to the prom. So, there's no judgment on the case yet, but it's actually in court. So, these things are happening all over the country.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you what's going to happen on the taking the names and excluding them based on names. I can tell you what's going to happen with that one. That's not going to go well for the people who did that.
Okay.
But some people are willing, and they think that they think that they're doing something morally right, and that gives them the that gives them permission to break the law. It doesn't. That's one of the first things I told you in 603 is nobody can give you permission to break the law, no matter why you're doing it. But we have this notion now in our society that if we have some moral authority, that overrules the law or gives us permission to break or ignore the law. It does not. It just doesn't. And those are hard lessons to learn. And most of the time your career at best is derailed, and sometimes it's ended.
And if she succumbs to them, or as I would say, fall prey, I mean, she's going to be out of a job, and they will be leading their normal lives, getting their paychecks, and she will be the one that's going to face the consequence.
That's exactly
so she has
right.
to think about what she does.
Yeah, and those very people that are egging her on, those parents that are applauding her, my suspicion is they won't send her any money when she's in the unemployment line. They'll just move right on. You know, you get on the wrong side, you're just on the wrong side. You know, the law comes first. That's the way it works. Excellent presentation. I love some of your later points in your presentation there. Very good. All right. So who's last on the hit parade?
Sharonda.
You are now the host. I'll stop my share. Stop the video.
You did the wrong person.
Who then?
Sharonda.
Oh, Sharonda. I thought you said.
No, not Sandra.
I do not.
It says S.C. Thompson.
There it is. I couldn't see it. I had to make my screen bigger. All right. Let me minimize this and see. There it is. I got to reclaim the host again. All right. Now. All right.
Screen. I guess.
There you are. I'm sorry, Sharonda.
No, you're fine. Can you all see it?
There we go. Excellent.
Okay. Okay. So our group pretty much had some of the same information that everyone else had. We all know what the case is about by now. One of the things that we first said was that she does not want her job anymore after reading this case. So how do I click? Okay. So student rights, we went straight into the questions. Would you consider Mary Lou's comments a veiled threat? The conversation was a threat, and she handled it in a discriminatory manner. What are her responsibilities under the law? First off, she's responsible for the safety of all of the students. So to say that they may be bullied or threatened, and to have parents talking about them is not acceptable. So therefore, she was breaking the law all around with that. And they can't be discriminated against because of race, religion, sexual orientation. As you all have stated, if it's not one thing, something else is going to come up. So you have to make sure that everyone is being treated well. How should Mary Lou respond to the concerns of Jerry and Cindy? This should not have been discussed with the parents individually. This is something that she should have responded to the whole staff and the school, as well as parents, student, staff. I don't know how she wanted to go about it, whether it would have been a pamphlet, a seminar, but she had to put the information out there of everyone having individual rights and being inclusive of everyone and everyone having a safe school to attend. And should Mary Lou allow Jimmy and Willie to attend the prom as a couple? Of course, but they cannot show PDA, that's been brought up again, personal displays of affection outside of what is allowed by the Student Code of Conduct and their student handbook. So she should have addressed that first and not whether or not it was between two guys. It didn't matter if it was boy, girl, or whomever. You can't have those kinds of displays of affection in your school. So she needed to crack down on that all around. And then we went from the stance of talking about bullying and cyberbullying, and then we went into the 4 paradigms. So Kendra is going to talk about what we discussed with bullying and cyberbullying.
Yes, looking for my mute. There we go. Okay, so with the bullying, we know with this we need to follow the bullying policy as outlined in the student handbooks, and those students that are involved will be disciplined in accordance to the district policy after exercising their due process, of course. As far as cyberbullying, to combat that issue, we started and we talked about how we would have the teachers start incorporating digital citizenship into their classrooms and the importance of kids' internet and their digital footprints into their curriculum, and letting them know that what they do now, even though they may post something and delete it, it will be there forever. The internet has no true erase button where something is removed. And for both instances, character education could also be incorporated so that they will understand what good character is and how to exemplify good character and be able to personally examine their behaviors and reflect internally to see whether or not they're actually displaying good character.
Very good.
And so I did justice when we were talking about this as a whole group. We wanted to focus on the fact that bullying is not tolerated at any level by anyone in the building, including the principal. So the idea that she did make a threat, a veiled threat, falls under one of the definitions of bullying, as well we wanted to make sure that there was no imbalance of power, any power play the principal might have been making and saying what she would and would not allow. Sorry about my dog. That was talked about. With regards to justice, we also wanted to look at some of the responsibilities of the principal to make sure that the climate of the school was warm and inviting, and that bullying, like we said, wasn't going to be tolerated at any level. We talked about in this class what the superintendent would do to the principal in this case to ensure that she was aware of the policies and procedures and the laws. As a small group, we talked about making sure that the students were receiving age-appropriate information in order to prevent and curtail any type of harassment that these students or any other students for that matter could face. And we referenced the stopbullying.org website for a lot of those suggestions. And then on our last justice slide, we used resources from NCDPI with regard to the North Carolina statutes as they relate to bullying. And there were several: hazing, the anti-bullying policy, how to prevent school violence, and so on. When it came to care, we did reference Title IX, as it was discussed earlier by some other groups. And the fact that we cannot discriminate based on sexual orientation, gender. There was a reference to the Girl Scouts in some of the readings, but that's playing out in the courts now too, with regards to allowing boys and Girl Scouts and girls and Boy Scouts, which I thought was interesting. But we talked about making sure that these students weren't discriminated against to go to prom because of their gender orientation. And another group also referenced the Equal Access Act, as we did too, which once again said that it's it's unlawful to deny access or to not treat any group unfairly or discriminate, especially because this public school is receiving federal funds. And then Maybelle's going to do critique, I believe.
Yes. Well, the ethic of critique mainly talks about how inequities may affect or impact power and voice in different people. So thinking about that, Mary Lou was favoring this other family. So basically she was kind of enforcing the heckler's veto rule because she was taking the definition in the book it was really interesting because it says it takes away the rights of the speaker and gives greater power to anyone who may be offended by the speech. So we are talking about different kinds of amendments that are affected here, of course. And they also ask this question: is the potential or actual disruption the fault of the speaker or those who are creating the disruption? So was it really that big what the kids were doing, or were people talking about that and made it bigger? And also the book addressed these laws. The Tinker basically was the one that was the most mentioned. So the paradigm of critique, or the ethic of critique in that sense, she was breaking it. And for the other one, for the profession, the ethic of profession is basically the decisions are in the best interest of the students. So we already talked about it, the freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, even because the parents were trying to impose their views, their religious views, and insulting the students. The freedom of assembly, because they anyway wanted to get together and try to do something to educate the school or the community. Equal protection for everybody. And of course, it is necessary to educate students and staff in different topics. So those are the paradigms.
Excellent. Very good. Okay. All right. So in our materials, there's a presentation that I did for DPI a few years back on antecedent behaviors. It's under that heading. And I want to look at it. We're going to cover this more in depth. Identification of strategy systems between violence. Okay. And so I want to go over this again. It has all those you just referenced, and sexual harassment, sexting. We're going to cover all of these things. And I have examples and have the laws, and we're going to spend some time on this one. We've got some scenarios that we'll talk about. Bullying and harassment. And definitions, and we're going to go through all of these, but most of this was a hit tonight. I did this one for to try to decrease violent acts in schools, but the laws are all the same. But what I would to close out tonight, what I would recommend to you, again, from our activity this week, I want you to pay particular attention to cyberbullying. That one I think is the most neglected. A lot of times these things pop up in our schools and we have to deal with them, but cyberbullying is one of those that we can choose to ignore if we want to. And I believe that that's going forward in this day and age, that may be our biggest challenge, is getting in front of cyberbullying. So I would encourage you to do some more research and some more legal scholarly research and digging into cyberbullying. We're going to cover it more when we get together face to face, but be prepared for that discussion as kind of a primer for when we get together next time. So look more in depth at cyberbullying, because I think that's the wave of the future. And in schools in general. Anything else for the good of the group tonight? Anybody have anything in closing? Well, as I said, either y'all are learning from somebody, probably not from me, but y'all are getting better. You did a great job tonight. All of you did is an excellent job. We hit all the right notes tonight and all the presentations. I'm very proud of you, the work that you're doing. I hope that you're learning something. And if there's nothing else for the good of the group, I will see you next Tuesday, and we'll continue again with case study 4. So everybody have a good week. Thank you for your participation.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.